summons for jury duty in the mail. Being a college student with finals right around the corner, I asked for a postponement, secretly hoping I could get out of it altogether. Little did I know, it is not that easy to be excused from jury duty. My postponement went to June, and when the time came around, I was dreading it. To my surprise, I was chosen to sit on the jury the first week of June and ended up enjoying my experience. According to the article Jury Service is one of the most important civic duties you can perform. Today I will inform you on the qualifications of becoming a jury member, the types of judicial proceedings and juries, and the process of a trial. There are many qualifications one must meet to be eligible for jury duty. You must be a U.S. citizen, 18 years old or older, to live primarily in the district for at least a year, know sufficient English in order to complete the juror qualification form, have no mental or physical conditions that make you ineligible, must not be subject to current felony charges, and must never have been convicted of a felony unless civil rights have been restored. If one meets all of these qualifications, then they may be chosen for jury duty at random, based on their voter registration or driver license databases. Jury service, no date. Several groups are exempt from federal jury service, including active duty members of the armed forces, members of professional fire and police departments, and full-time public officers of federal, state, or local governments. Jury service, no date. Other excuses may vary from court to court. Some courts may choose to excuse a person if they are over the age of 70, have served on a federal jury within the past 2 years, served as a volunteer firefighter, or are members of a rescue squad or ambulance crew, or if they are going through a time of hardship or extreme inconvenience. Jury service, no date. According to the article Jury Service, there are 2 types of judicial proceedings in the federal courts that require juries. There are criminal cases and civil cases. A criminal case is when an individual or organization is charged with breaking the criminal law, and a civil case is a suit in which those who disagree over their rights or duties go into court to settle their differences. Handbook for trial jurors, no date. There are many parts that make up a criminal case, including the jury itself, the defendant, and an indictment. Handbook for trial jurors, no date. On a criminal trial, the jury is usually made of 12 people with an alternate. Jury service, no date. According to the article, the criminal case, the person charged with the violation of the law is the defendant. The charge against the defendant may be brought in 2 ways. One way is by means of an indictment, which is a written accusation by a grand jury that charges the defendant with committing an offense against the law, or by an information. An information is a name given to a written charge against the defendant filed by the United States Attorney. The criminal case, no date. Once the indictment or information is filed, the defendant will appear in open court. The court then advises the defendant of the charge or charges and will ask if the defendant pleads guilty or not guilty. If the defendant were to plead guilty, then there is no need for a trial. During a criminal trial, the judge will tell a jury what the law is, and the jury must then determine what facts are true. Based on the facts the jury finds to be true, they are to determine if the defendant is guilty or not. If the defendant is accused of more than one charge, then the jury is responsible for either finding the defendant guilty of all charges, not guilty of any of the charges, or guilty of some of the charges and not guilty of others. The criminal case, no date. There are several components that make up a civil trial, including the jury, the plaintiff, and the defendant. In a civil case, there is at least 6 people that make up the jury. In the end, the jury must come to a unanimous decision unless instructed otherwise. Jury service, no date. The plaintiff is the person or organization who begins the case, whereas the defendant is the person or organization who the case will be against. The plaintiff will begin by stating his or her claim in a paper called the complaint, and the defendant will reply to the complaint in a paper called the answer. Both the complaint and the answer are the main claims in this case. The civil case, no date. Now that we know both types of judicial proceedings, let's briefly discuss the 2 types of juries. If you'll draw your attention to the TV real quick. The first type is a trial jury, which usually has 6 to 12 people, and the second type is a grand jury that has 16 to 24 people. According to the article Jury Service, there are 2 types of juries that serve different functions in the federal trial courts. There are trial juries and grand juries. Trial juries are the ones that will deal with local issues in your county, usually consisting of 6 to 12 people, and are generally public. criminal case, trial juries will decide if the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the crime they are charged with. In the civil cases, they will decide whether the defendant injured the plaintiff or not. A grand jury is a jury that deals with federal criminal cases, generally consisting of 16 to 23 people and not open to the public. They are presented with evidence from a U.S. attorney and will determine if there is a probable cause to be certain that the individual has committed the crime they are accused of and should be put on trial. If the grand jury determines there is enough evidence, an indictment will be issued against the defendant. Jury service, no date. Now that we know some background information on the qualifications to become a jury member and the different types of trials, let's discuss the process a jury member goes through during a trial. The first thing a juror will receive is a summoning in the mail. It is then the juror's responsibility to follow the instructions as provided. If your number is called, it is then your duty to report to the courthouse where a panel of prospective jurors will be waiting. To narrow down the panel to just the 6 to 12 people that will form the jury for the trial, all members must go through a questioning process. This process is called the voir dire. Members of the panel are asked questions to judge if any of the individuals have knowledge, prejudice, or any other reasons that may influence their interpretation of the case. The voir dire examination, no date. Once the voir dire is over, the selected jurors will be sworn in and the trial will begin. The jurors' solemn oath, no date. To begin the trial, the lawyers will present their opening statements, followed by calling on witnesses, providing evidence to prove their case, and then ending with closing statements on both sides. Once the trial is over, the judge will instruct the jury on what the law is and retire the jury to deliberate. The 8 stages of trial, no date. In deliberation, the jury must come to a unanimous decision to decide whether a defendant is guilty beyond reasonable doubt or not guilty. Jury service, no date. Once the jury reaches its decision, the verdict will be read aloud in the courtroom and the jury is free to go. Today I have informed you of the qualifications to becoming a jury member, the 2 types of judicial proceedings and juries, and the process of a trial. Now when you get your summons in the mail for jury duty, you will have an idea of the process. Just remember, jury service is one of the most important civic duties you can perform. Jury service, no date.
6 minutes, 30 seconds.